Let's take a look at some charts from Zcash on last week's article for Brave New Coin. So like Dash, DCR, and Pivx, Zcash is a optional privacy coin. It is not privacy by default. I think even the Zcash devs admittedly will tell you that they would change that if they could, because, as we know now, default privacy generally gets turned off and or isn't used by most people and or doesn't have a large enough pool of users to really know what's going on there from a privacy perspective aspect. Dash and Zcash were recently added to Chainalysis, which is a blockchain company that law enforcement uses to track transactions. Zcash's privacy abilities are turned off on the exchange side. So all this adds up to me as a layman that Zcash really isn't a privacy coin at all when it comes down to it. If we look at market cap, daily transaction volume, daily fees, transactions per day, daily active addresses, GitHub commits, if we compare all this stuff, even though some of it's really nothing alike, Dash and Pivx, Dash and DCR are proof of work, proof of stake. I think Pivx is too, actually. Grin and Monero are default privacy. They obscure transaction volume and active addresses. So these aren't really, they really shouldn't be compared to each other, but I just do because they're considered privacy. It's the privacy bucket, okay? ZEC in the yellow here. Again, I don't know why this is. Just like Neo, daily transaction volume for ZEC is way up there. Now, the ZEC people will tell you that daily active addresses are low because the shielded addresses don't show up here. That's great, but when I look at shielded transactions, there aren't many of them. So we can say this is low because shielded transactions aren't included, but when I look at shielded transactions, it's hard to show that that would add up to much for me. Maybe I'm just misunderstanding it, but fees in the middle, transactions in the middle, GitHub commits second to Pivx. Looking at the inflation rates of all these from the previous, including Bitcoin, we can see that the Zcash is way up there at 40. Grin is the next highest at 70. BTC is down here at around 2. XMR is here, and a few of the others are in here. Dash at around 6%. So it's really hard to convince anybody using logic that you should hold ZEC, you should buy ZEC because the inflation's 40%. And again, the ZEC people will tell you that you're funding the development. This development is state of the art. Other coins are leeching this development for free. All that's good and well, and I agree with them. But you know what? It's real simple. If inflation is 40%, how is that going to hold any value over time? It just boggles my mind. Now they have a block reward reduction coming in November. And because of the block time adjustment, it looks like it's a lot more than it is as far as the reward reduction. But block times got reduced to 75 seconds. So the block reward is going to be reduced from 12.5 ZEC. What's the block times now? Maybe it's every 2 minutes to 3.125 ZEC every 75 seconds. I think the math works out to basically it's a halving for Zcash. So this inflation should go down pretty dramatically, like 20%, right? It should get cut in half. We'll see how that works out in November, but that's how I assume what's going to happen after that protocol change goes through. In general, again, the mining reward distribution for ZEC is that miners get 80% and then 20% of it goes to fund development, outreach, grants, privacy-related initiatives. All this is great. Again, I love it as for the ecosystem. It's amazing, right? But if I'm holding Zcash, I don't want people dumping 20% of the rewards distribution, right? Like miners are going to dump 100% of BTC anyway, but the job of BTC for many people is store value, and Zcash kind of doesn't have a job for people in my mind. Again, this is my perspective, so it's warped obviously, but biased, etc. If Zcash can't accrue value over time, to me it's useless, right? I don't use Zcash for privacy. I would use Monero, but this is how the Zcash community has decided to fund the treasury going forward. And I think Dash and Pivx and anything else with the treasury, it's around 10% of the mining rewards. So that's another point of contention as far as, it's 20% tax for ECC or whoever Zcash grants. I like where their head is at here. I just think overall it's too high. I think 10% is fine. And who am I to say what percentage is fine? Obviously the community voted on this and that's what they wanted. But I think, again, it's hard to convince people that you should buy ZEC, you should be invested in the ecosystem, you should become a community member when 20% is taxed and used. I mean, it's used in a good way. It's used to promote the ecosystem, but it just doesn't have a job elsewhere, right? Like it's got 60 to 40% inflation. This is shielded and non-shielded addresses, shielded in the blue here. Now, I don't know why I always find different numbers for this on different websites, but this is one of the Zcash websites, I'm pretty sure. Let me just double check. It's Z-Chain Statistics Explorer. So you can see as a whole, the shielded transactions here make up next to nothing. So either I'm misunderstanding this or I'm just not getting the right information. I'm looking at transactions per day and average transaction values. Average transactions per day, extremely bullish. You can see they have this up and to the right trend. So there's a lot more activity now than there was beginning of the year, which is bullish for any chain in a vacuum. If I were to see this chart for anything, I'd say, wow, what happened in July 2018? And it looks really bullish based on this transaction per day metric. Average transaction values have come down a bit as expected. If price remains flat and transactions per day increase, in general, average transaction values drop. Looking at block size and fees, both are basically all-time lows. Block size has slowly started to increase here over time. I don't know what the block size limit for Zcash is, but in general, this just says there's a lot of unused block space here. So it's kind of just empty despite all these transactions per day. Overall, it's just kind of, there's nothing going on there really. If you were to compare this to ETH or BTC or a busier chain, those blocks are almost full or full most of the time, which again leads to scaling issues and other stuff. But just looking at this in the vacuum, this just says to me, no one's using it. Fees are low, which they should be if average block size is low. Looking at monthly active addresses and NVT, an inverse metric of economic utility. NVT is increasing, which is bearish. This says that on-chain activity relative to market cap has been decreasing over time. And to see daily active or monthly active addresses drop off basically to an all-time low, again, not bullish in a vacuum. The ZEC people tell me that this is related to shielded addresses. But again, I don't know how much of this drop-off is related to shielded addresses, right? Like, okay, it's dropped off to next to nothing as far as active addresses is concerned relative to where it was. Is this all shielded addresses now? Even though I look at shielded transactions and it's also next to nothing? So I think there's something I'm misunderstanding there, hopefully, because otherwise it's just 2 plus 2 does not equal 75, right? NVT increasing also is related to this active address issue. Now, if the shielded addresses are obscured, those metrics and values from this calculation, which I'm pretty sure they would be, NVT is going to be falsely elevated. So any shielded transaction would actually bring this value down. Looking at MVRV, historically, again, this is related to market cap versus realized cap or how much coins are moving on the chain. The buy zones are pretty clear, anything below 0.4 here. Sell zones, less clear, anything above 1, but plenty of room for the upside, plenty of room to get overbought. This is neutral to bullish, definitely. It's out of the doldrum zone, also out of the catch knife bull zone, but plenty of upside. One thing I learned when doing this the other day was that there was an Antminer Bitmain new ASIC coming online this month, which made sense when I looked at the hash rate and mining pools. So in general, anything that's released from specifically Bitmain is mined before it's shipped. So as they're produced, they're turned on immediately. I don't know if they still do this, but I assume they do. It's not exactly a great business practice from the consumer perspective. So this ASIC blows all these others out of the water as far as efficiency is concerned. Now, Zcash has said in the past that they'd rather focus on other things than changing the mining algo to kick ASICs off the chain. We'll see if their tune changes if this ASIC takes off, because what you're going to see is hash rate just absolutely explode. as it stands now, hash rate is just flat. So this agrees with my hypothesis that there's some occult mining going on or whatever, because hash rate would just keep going up. This was the change in block time, I'm pretty sure. Late last year when that hard fork happened. That's why the difficulty is where it is. These are the mining pools for Zcash, and compared to the article I did a couple months ago, this looks vastly different, which is one of the reasons why I think there's some weird mining activity going on here. You don't usually see a bunch of unknown addresses for mining pools. You usually see names, fly pool via BTC, whoever. You don't really see that here. So there's something going on in the mining perspective, mining space that isn't necessarily black and white, but from what I can tell, these aren't, massive pools being mined. So this is just independent Zcash miners with massive farms. That's how I would read this. Google Trends for Zcash is near all-time lows. Just says no one really cares about it. No one's searching for it. No one's looking up how to buy Zcash. What is Zcash? What are shielded transactions? That sort of thing. In general, spikes in Google Trends correspond with price and can oftentimes lead price because it shows new money coming in to that specific coin as people learn about it and search for it and that sort of thing. So not bullish, certainly. Flipping to technicals, Bitfinex long shorts at the top here, VPVR, volume, RSI, 50, 200 EMA, and yearly pivot. So overall, this looks really similar to Dash in that it's coming up on this big VPVR level at a yearly pivot with a golden cross. Now, historically, since 2018, the USD pair has essentially held below the 200, though that just says, litmus test bear trend. If it can get above this VPVR zone, very heavy resistance here. You can see that. This is the largest resistance zone at any price for Zcash. So if it can get above that, if it can get above 70, if it can get above the psychological resistance of 100, retest this local high. This will take weeks to months, most likely, but I think it has a decent chance. Yearly pivot's probably around 100 as well. So there's a lot of resistance at 100 to 115, whatever this is, this local high. So I wouldn't expect anything massive this year even. But this big first hurdle is getting through all these people who are still break even or about to be break even and wanting to get out of their USD positions and cutting through this volume profile. One thing I didn't talk about, there's probably some harmonic here. You can look up the shapes and whatever, but I didn't map it out. It would give you some idea of a target over here. It would be considered a bearish bat, I think, something like that. I don't know. They've got animal names, you can look it up. But that'll give you a price target somewhere between 100 and 120, most likely. I thought it was interesting the Zcash longs for Bitfinex have been continually declining since mid-2019. They very clearly went up, and now they're just kind of dying off. Shorts spiked crazy high earlier this year, and then essentially just went back to previous levels. So nothing really exciting to talk about there as far as affecting price in the future. Looking at the cloud in a vacuum, this is extremely bullish. Just crossed above the cloud. Cloud is flipping bullish. TK cross is bullish. It is above the lagging spans above the cloud. So this is all the exact textbook metrics I want to see if I'm a cloud trader from a trend perspective. This says the dynamics have definitely flipped bullish, and I'd expect bullish continuation over the next weeks to months where we sit right now. The last thing you'd be waiting for is the K line, this Kijun, to be above the cloud, similar to here. But to me, that's a little bit nitpicky for a trend. I know a lot of people mentioned that recently for cloud stuff, but I don't really pay attention to that too much. You might see like a weaker bull trend until it gets above the cloud, but I think with these settings, just how this looks historically, that's been good to go for bull continuation. Looking at the ZEC BTC chart, it's a bit of a mess. Really, the important thing is, again, price has been below the 200 since before 2018 for most of Zcash's life. It's been below the 200 EMA. It's been below the cloud most of its life. It's been in this bearish pitchfork for most of its life. You can see all of that sort of comes to an end very shortly here. if it can break above 007, even lower than that, 0065 probably. So over the next 6 months, two things are going to happen. Well, one of two things is going to happen. It's either going to go up or down, right? It's either going to break all of this bearish trappings. It's going to break it all at the same time. It's going to break the cloud to the upside. It's going to break the 200 to the upside. It's going to break the pitchfork to the upside. If none of that happens, it's going to retest this median line like it's done many times before. So if I was a Zcash bull, I wouldn't get too excited until we were clearly above all this stuff. The good news is it's very obvious and easy to see. You know, this isn't some like chicken bones reading in the sand. What's going on here? It's all the same level. If it's above 065, should be good to go. Got yearly pivots on the way up. It's got tons of volume support here. It's got some VPVR resistance on the way up, but most of this was just slow bleeding, right? There wasn't a lot of consolidating at all through 2018, 2019. Most of the consolidating happened at this current level. So where this sits, you got a decent chance for being bullish. The long shorts are a bit disgusting as far as, you know, it's like 99% long. So if this does turn south, watch out, because these longs are going to get nervous. I think in order for Zcash to break these lows, alts in general would have to just fall off the table, which is certainly possible. But yeah, just looking, I mean, you know, you compare this to this picture of open interest. This is reasonable and exciting. This says be careful of the long squeeze because it's mostly long. So there's something to pay attention to. But yeah, this level, it's worth putting an alert on whatever trading app you use, because that looks really good in a vacuum, even though I'm clearly not a fan of Zcash on the fundamentals. The technicals look ripe for a bullish reversal over the next 6 months.